Good afternoon from the National Weather Service office in Lake Charles, Louisiana. I'm meteorologist Donald Jones with your 4:30 p.m. update on what is still Tropical Storm Francine. Now, the good news is we still have not seen much in the way of any kind of significant intensification from Francine this afternoon. We're still looking at maximum sustained winds right around 65 miles per hour, which is where we started the day with and where we ended the day last night with. So it's been about a 24-hour period of very little, if any, intensification. The pressure has come down ever so slightly in the storm center of circulation, but no increase in wind speed, at least not at this time. So that's certainly some good news. Now, we are still anticipating some development as we go through tonight and into tomorrow. Perhaps all the way up to landfall. I think it's going to encounter a little bit more in the way of hostile conditions as it gets close to making landfall. So perhaps peaking slightly before actually reaching landfall. But we are still expecting Francine to become a Category 1 hurricane before making landfall tomorrow afternoon. We're going to talk about all of that. I also have the parish by parish breakdowns with the latest impacts expected based on the current forecast track, which, yes, has again shifted ever so slightly to the east by about 15 miles. So we're going to talk about the impacts as it relates to that for each parish and county in the area. And then, of course, we will answer any questions that you have just as soon as we wrap up our briefing. Let's go ahead and jump into it here. Again, Tropical Storm Francine has not intensified any further this afternoon. Still 65 mile per hour maximum sustained winds. We do still forecast it to become a Category 1 hurricane before making landfall sometime tomorrow afternoon. So additional intensification is expected as we go through the evening and overnight hours tonight. The forecast track compared to this morning has shifted again about 15 miles to the east. Landfall is still expected somewhere around the Morgan City area sometime tomorrow afternoon between roughly about 4 and 7 p.m. or thereabouts. As a result of that eastward shift, hurricane warnings that were in effect for coastal portions of Jefferson County and offshore have been downgraded to tropical storm warnings, as we're no longer expecting hurricane conditions anywhere, even in the offshore waters south of Jefferson County. This is the latest visible satellite view of Francine this afternoon. And let me go ahead and make this full screen so you can a little bit more detailed. It kind of shows up a little bit better when it's a full screen there. And you can see there is still that central dense overcast, that CDO that we were talking about this morning. So that is an indication that there's virtually no wind shear over the storm. So those conditions are certainly favorable for development right now. Of course, sea surface temperatures still very warm and favorable. So we do anticipate that that this storm will continue to intensify this afternoon and this evening. You can see that blob of shower and thunderstorm activity has been bringing quite a bit of rainfall already this afternoon to parts of south and central Louisiana. That's not directly related to Francine, actually, but it is providing some extra moisture for the storm. So it's kind of had been pulling in some drier air from the southwest side, but it's also pulling in some moist air kind of from the north. So it's trying to balance out those two competing air masses while at the same time attempting to intensify. So it's kind of got a lot battling for supremacy, if you will, in terms of how much moisture is actually going to get in there to allow the storm to intensify. This is the 4 p.m. advisory from the National Hurricane Center. Again, maximum sustained winds still near 65 miles per hour. The movement is to the northeast at about 10 miles per hour. It is beginning to pick up forward speed, which we did expect. We have been anticipating an increase in forward speed and acceleration all the way up until landfall, and that is underway. We expect the storm to be moving to the northeast at about 15 miles an hour or thereabout when it makes landfall tomorrow afternoon. Now, Francine, as I mentioned, is still expected to become a Category 1 hurricane with maximum sustained winds near 90 miles per hour before making that landfall tomorrow afternoon somewhere near the Morgan City area in and around Vermilion Bay. As I mentioned just a moment ago, the hurricane warnings that were in effect west of Cameron have now been downgraded to tropical storm warnings. We do still have hurricane warnings in effect for the eastern half of Cameron Parish, as well as Vermilion, Iberia, Lafayette, St. Martin, and St. Mary parishes, where hurricane force winds remain possible. And then we have tropical storm force winds still in effect, or tropical storm warnings still in effect for Calcasieu, Jeff Davis, Allen, Acadia, Evangeline, St. Landry, and Avoyelles, as well as now lower Jefferson County and Sabine Lake. So still quite a few tropical storm warnings and several parishes still under hurricane warnings at this hour. Now, as far as the tropical storm force wind speed probabilities, there is now near a 100% chance of seeing tropical storm force winds across coastal portions of Vermilion, Iberia, St. Martin, and St. Mary parishes. In fact, we're expecting a pretty good chance of seeing hurricane force winds in those areas. There's about a 60 to 80% chance of seeing tropical storm force winds in and around the Lafayette area. 30 to 60% chance of seeing tropical storm force winds across the southwest Louisiana area away from the immediate coast. So that would include the Lake Charles area. Not out of the realm of possibility that we could see some gusts to tropical storm force. They would be the lower end of tropical storm force, though, as opposed to, we're looking at probably gusts to 40 miles per hour. I see a couple of comments in here asking about the time being wrong at the top of the broadcast or at the slide there. Yeah, I did forget to update those. I'm sorry, but I promise the information here is updated. I just forgot to update the times there at the top of the slides. I'll take care of that before sending these out this afternoon. There is a 10 to 30% chance of seeing tropical storm force winds across coastal portions of southeast Texas. We're really not expecting to see tropical storm force winds across southeast Texas. That's why the probabilities are very low. Same thing across parts of central Louisiana, looking at about a 10 to 40% chance of seeing tropical storm force winds in those areas. Here are the probabilities of seeing hurricane force winds. So we're looking at about a 30 to 60% probability of seeing hurricane force winds across coastal portions of Cameron, Vermilion, Iberia, St. Martin, and St. Mary parishes, and a 5 to 10% probability of seeing hurricane force winds in and around the Lafayette area. So it seems much more likely in and around the Lafayette area, we're going to see strong tropical storm force winds as opposed to actual hurricane force winds in those areas. The hurricane force winds are going to be confined closer to in and around Vermilion Bay and points further east along the southeastern Louisiana coastline. At least at this point, that is where the higher probabilities are. One thing that hasn't changed a whole lot is the likely time of arrival. We are still looking at tropical storm force winds beginning between about 8 and 10 a.m. Tomorrow morning. And then the strongest of the winds, the potential hurricane force winds, are going to make landfall and move inland during the afternoon and early evening time frame. So the tropical storm force winds will be beginning early in the morning, shortly after sunrise. And then we'll be looking at the hurricane force winds making landfall or moving inland during the afternoon hours from that point into the early to mid-evening. The hurricane force winds actually shouldn't make it too far inland before the storm begins to rapidly lose strength. So we're not going to be looking at hurricane force winds more than say about 50 miles or so inland. These are the forecast maximum wind gusts that we're expecting to see across the region. You can see the highest forecast wind gusts, of course, in and around Vermilion Bay. For Morgan City, where we're expecting pretty much the highest, that's where we're expecting landfall to occur. So you're going to be in that northern eye wall at roughly 90 miles per hour wind gusts. And in and around Vermilion Bay, of course, the area is expected to see the highest overall wind gusts. St. Mary, St. Martin, Iberia, and coastal portions of Vermilion Parish likely to see the most significant wind gusts in our area. Lafayette expecting to have wind gusts close to 50 miles per hour. Further back to the west across Lake Charles, we're not looking at or ruling out the possibility of some gust to tropical storm force at around 40 miles per hour. That's why we do have those tropical storm warnings still in effect. Going further to the north up towards Alexandria, a little bit lower, 30-mile-an-hour wind gusts, but I wouldn't necessarily rule out the possibility of 1 or 2 gusts to 40. Further back across southeast Texas, you can see those wind gusts get significantly lower. We're only looking at 20, 25-mile-per-hour wind gusts back across southeast Texas. So it'll certainly be a breezy day, but it's not going to be enough to cause any kind of significant damage or too much of an inconvenience unless you're trying to fly a kite. Actually, for southeast Texas, that might be pretty good conditions for kite flying weather. All right, let's talk a little bit now. We've kind of talked about this before. This hasn't changed a whole lot. The overall steering pattern, and this has remained pretty much the same. The storm is being steered to the north by a high-pressure area over the eastern Gulf of Mexico. We're getting this clockwise rotation of winds. That is what is kind of causing the storm has kind of gotten to the north of the parallel line here of this high pressure area, which is why it's now moving off to the northeast. It's going to begin to interact with a stationary frontal boundary that's over the Gulf Coast here. And as it does so, that's part of what's going to cause it to actually accelerate and move inland. And then it's going to quickly move off to the north, where it'll subsequently dissipate by the end of the week. Now, as the storm approaches the coast and begins to interact with this cold front boundary, there is going to be an increase of wind shear, because the winds blowing along this cold front are actually blowing from west to east, something like that. So as the storm is moving and the winds are coming counterclockwise into the storm, the winds are going to be blowing in a completely different direction. And when we get that, that's what we call wind shear, and it essentially is going to try to tear the storm apart. Now, it may not completely do so by the time the storm actually makes landfall, but it will serve at least enough, hopefully, to stop intensification, if not slowly weaken the storm as it gets close to the coastline and moves inland. Of course, sea surface temperatures are still plenty warm enough for tropical development. We're looking at mid to upper 80s, where we've been for the last several days. No reason to think that's going to change between now and tomorrow. So certainly very favorable sea surface conditions. Wind shear across the western Gulf of Mexico still remains very low. We do see that higher wind shear. You can see the areas highlighted in red there. That is the wind shear associated with the cold front, and that will have the potential to begin to tear this storm apart as it approaches the coastline. But you can see the majority of that wind shear is actually already inland, so it's not going to be until it gets very close to the coastline that we see that wind shear actually begin to affect the storm in any measurable way. Taking a look at our rainfall probabilities and threats, we are still looking at a low-end chance of flash flooding as we go into the overnight hours tonight. This is essentially for the rest of the day today. As we get into tonight, we'll continue to see some of those rain bands move across the area. You can see the highest risk for flooding right now, essentially along and south of a line, pretty much right along the I-10 corridor, Lafayette southwards. And then as we get into southeast Louisiana, south of Baton Rouge, this would include the New Orleans, Slidell, Houma areas. And then as we get into tomorrow, the overall flash flood risk is going to be along and east of that center of circulation as it makes landfall. So essentially from roughly about Acadia Parish eastward across southeast Louisiana into coastal portions of Mississippi and Alabama as well, in a moderate risk. So that's a 40% chance of seeing flash flooding within this area highlighted in red here. So that does include the Lafayette, New Iberia, up towards St. Landry, Avoyelles Parish, Vermilion Parish, Acadia Parish. All of those areas are going to be at higher overall risk because you're going to be very close to that center of circulation, and that's usually where the most rainfall actually falls. We do have flood watches still in effect for portions of the region. We have removed Vernon and Beauregard Parish from the flood watch because we're looking at lower overall rainfall totals with that at this point, but flood watches do remain in effect until Thursday morning for the remainder of the region, and that does extend into southeast Louisiana as well. Here's a look at our forecast rainfall totals, generally looking at between 8 and 12 inches in and around the Vermilion Bay area. The remainder of south central and southeast Louisiana, a large swath of 6 to 8 inches expected, and there's a very tight gradient of precipitation as you get on the west side of the storm. So between Lafayette and, say, Lake Charles, we go from looking at 6 to 8 inches to as little as 1 to 2 inches. So there's going to be a very quick knockoff from where the westernmost extent of those rain bands is going to be, with areas west of that not expecting to see much. In fact, parts of southeast Texas may not see any rain at all out of this system at this point. We do still have storm surge warnings in effect for coastal parts of Cameron Parish, Lower Vermilion, Lower St. Martin, and St. Mary parishes. The storm surge warning that was in effect for coastal Jefferson County, that has actually been downgraded to a coastal flood advisory. A coastal flood advisory is issued when we're expecting essentially surge of 1 to 2 feet. A storm surge warning is when we're expecting 3 feet or more. So we're expecting lower overall storm surge across coastal portions of Jefferson County. That's why that has been downgraded. But we are still looking at significant storm surge possible across areas in the storm surge warning here. Looking at our peak storm surge forecast, we're looking at 5 to 10 feet of storm surge between Rockefeller Wildlife Refuge and Port Fourchon. That has remained pretty consistent. West of Rockefeller, between there and Cameron, we're looking at 3 to 5 feet of surge. Between Cameron and Sabine Pass, 2 to 4, and from Sabine Pass to Freeport, 1 to 3. That's why we're in that the coastal Jefferson County was downgraded to that coastal flood advisory. Because a storm surge warning requires more than 3 feet of surge, and we're just not expecting that at this point that far west with the current track that this storm is on. We do still have a low-end tornado risk, although this threat has also shifted somewhat further to the east as the storm has shifted to the east. Essentially, the tornado risk will exist roughly from Lafayette east to New Iberia down towards Morgan City. The higher overall risk is going to be, though, in southeast Louisiana, in the areas highlighted in yellow there, essentially from Morgan City over towards New Orleans, the North Shore Lake Pontchartrain, and this does extend into coastal portions of Mississippi and Alabama as well. But the good news is for most of southwest Louisiana, southeast Texas, there is now no longer really any significant threat of tornadoes with this system as it moves across, because you're going to be fairly well away on the western side of that center of circulation. Most of the tornadoes that happen in hurricanes tend to be on the east side of the storm, and most of our region will be on the west. It's not impossible for a tornado to form on the west side, but it is pretty rare for it to do so, and even more rare for it to do so well away from the center of circulation. This is a quick look at our upcoming briefings. Going forward here through the rest of the night, we are going to do another briefing tonight at 10:30 p.m., and we will have another briefing tomorrow morning at 10:30 a.m. So if all you were interested in was just a quick update here, that'll be it for you, and you can head on out. We are going to do our parish by parish breakdown next here, and then we'll answer some questions for a few minutes. I do have another briefing I have to be on at the top of the hour, so I can't stick around for too long, but I'll try to answer a few questions before we get out of here. But again, our next briefing will be 10:30 p.m. tonight, and we'll have another one tomorrow morning at 10:30 a.m. All right, let's go ahead and jump now straight into our parish by parish briefings or breakdown here. And we'll start with the most significantly impacted areas in our region. So for Vermilion Parish, these have changed a little bit, by the way, from earlier this morning. And these will be posted on our social media pages once this is concluded. So Vermilion Parish, 50 to 60 mile per hour winds are expected, gusting to 75. Storm surge is still going to be between 5 and 10 feet. Rainfall totals 8 to 10 inches with up to 16 inches possible. We're looking at a marginal risk, a 2 to 4% chance of seeing tornadoes. And we could see a fair amount of power outages with those strong tropical storm force, hurricane force winds, definitely damaging some of the electrical infrastructure. For Lafayette Parish, 30 to 40 mile per hour winds gusting to 50, 4 to 6 inches of rainfall with up to 12 inches possible. A marginal risk of tornadoes, that's 2 to 4%. And we could have a few power outages in the Lafayette Parish area as well. For Iberia Parish, 60 to 70 mile per hour winds gusting to 80, 5 to 10 feet of storm surge along the coastline, 8 to 10 inches of rainfall with up to 16 inches possible. There is a low end risk, a marginal risk, 2 to 4% of seeing a tornado. And we could see definitely some power outages across Iberia Parish with wind gusts of 80 plus miles per hour. For St. Martin Parish, 60 to 70 mile per hour winds gusting to 80, 5 to 10 feet of storm surge, 8 to 10 inches of rainfall with up to 16 inches possible. A marginal risk, which is a 2 to 4% chance of seeing a tornado, and we are probably going to see a fair amount of power outages across St. Martin Parish. For St. Mary Parish, 70 to 80 mile per hour winds gusting to 90. This is where the landfall is expected to be at this point, right at Morgan City or thereabouts. Storm surge 5 to 10 feet, rainfall 8 to 10 inches with up to 16 inches possible. There is a slight risk of tornadoes, a little bit higher of a risk, a 5 to 9% chance of seeing tornadoes. And we are expecting some power outages across St. Mary due to those hurricane force wind gusts that we're anticipating across the parish. Evangeline Parish, 30 to 40 mile per hour sustained winds gusting to 50, 2 to 4 inches of rainfall with up to 8 inches possible. We're not expecting a tornado threat anymore. We could have a few power outages across Evangeline with some of those stronger gusts, but I don't expect them to be too widespread. For Avoyelles, 30 to 40 mile per hour winds gusting to 50, 2 to 3 inches of rainfall with up to 6 inches possible. We're no longer expecting a tornado threat across Avoyelles, and we could have a few power outages across Avoyelles as well, but we're not expecting those to be widespread. For St. Landry, 40 to 50 mile per hour winds gusting to 60, 4 to 6 inches of rainfall with up to 12 inches possible. We're no longer expecting a tornado threat for St. Landry, and we could have a few power outages again across St. Landry, but we're not expecting those to be widespread. For Cameron Parish, 40 to 50 mile per hour winds gusting to 60, storm surge 2 to 5 feet, rainfall totals of 2 to 8 inches with up to 16 inches possible. We are not expecting tornadoes across Cameron, and we could have some power outages across Cameron, especially lower Cameron, where those stronger wind gusts will be moving ashore. For Calcasieu Parish, 30 to 40 mile per hour winds gusting to 50. Rainfall totals of 2 to 3 inches with up to 6 inches possible. We are not expecting a tornado threat across Calcasieu. We could have a few power outages with some of those tropical storm force wind gusts, but I don't expect them to be too widespread. For Beauregard Parish, 25 to 35 mile per hour winds gusting to 45. Rainfall totals of 1 to 2 inches with up to 4 inches possible. We're not expecting a tornado threat across Beauregard. We may see a couple of power outages across Beauregard if we're not lucky, but they should be fairly isolated. For Vernon Parish, 15 to 25 mile per hour winds gusting to 30, 1 to 2 inches of rainfall with up to 4 inches possible. We are not expecting a tornado threat across Vernon. We could have some periods of heavy rainfall, but that is pretty much going to be the only impact that Vernon Parish is going to see. For Jeff Davis, 30 to 40 mile per hour winds gusting to 50, rainfall totals of 2 to 3 inches with up to 6 inches possible. We are also not having much of a tornado threat across Jeff Davis anymore. We could have a few power outages, but we're not expecting those to be widespread. For Allen Parish, 20 to 30 mile per hour winds gusting to 40. Rainfall totals of 2 to 3 inches with up to 6 inches possible. No tornado threat across Allen Parish. And again, we could have a couple of power outages if you're just unfortunate to have a tree branch fall on a power line, but we're not expecting those to be widespread. For Rapides, 15 to 25 mile per hour winds gusting to 35. Rainfall totals of 1 to 3 inches with up to 6 inches possible. We are not expecting a tornado threat. And other than some periods of heavy rainfall, we are not expecting much in the way of real significant impacts across Rapides. For Acadia Parish, 30 to 40 mile per hour winds gusting to 50. Rainfall totals of 3 to 6 inches with up to 12 inches possible. Not expecting much of a tornado threat across Acadia. Maybe a few power outages with some of those tropical storm force wind gusts, but those should not be widespread. Newton County in southeast Texas, 15 to 20 mile per hour winds gusting to 30. Only expecting about a quarter to maybe a half inch of rainfall, maybe up to an inch on the high end. But we're really not expecting much in the way of rainfall even across Newton County, and we're not expecting any significant hazards. For Jefferson County, right along the immediate coastline, 30 to 40 mile an hour winds gusting to 50. Those are not going to be nearly as high once you get a little further inland, closer to the Beaumont area. You'll probably be more like 20 to 30. Storm surge 2 to 4 feet, also right along the immediate coastline. Rainfall totals 1 to 2 inches with up to 4 inches possible. Not expecting a tornado threat. We could have a few power outages, especially along the coast, but I don't expect that to be very widespread, and probably not a whole lot in Beaumont or Port Arthur proper. For Orange, 20 to 30 mile per hour winds gusting to 40. Storm surge 2 to 4 feet. Rainfall 1 to 1.5 inches with up to 3 inches possible. We do not have a tornado threat across Orange County, and I don't expect much in the way of power outages unless you're just really, really unlucky across Orange County. For Hardin County, 15 to 20 mile per hour winds gusting to 30. Rainfall totals between a quarter of an inch to a half an inch, possibly up to an inch. It may not rain at all also across parts of Hardin County. Tyler County is going to be the same way, 15 to 20 mile per hour winds gusting to 30. A half inch up to an inch of rain, maybe 2. Parts of Tyler County may not actually see any rain at all, though, out of this system. Finally, for Jasper County, 15 to 20 mile per hour winds gusting to 30. Half inch to an inch of rainfall with up to 2 inches possible. No tornadoes expected, and no significant hazards are expected. So that's what we have here this afternoon for you from the National Weather Service in Lake Charles. If you have any questions, I've got roughly about 5 minutes to answer them before I got to run off to this other briefing. I kind of got overbooked here, very close together. But I am going to try to answer at least a few of them here. And then if you have questions that I can't get to right now, feel free to send me a direct message on Facebook. You are also welcome to email me or give us a call. Email address is on your screen there, as is our phone number. So I'm going to go ahead and back up here and just check within the last 5 minutes or so for any questions. If you do have one, I'll be happy to answer it for 5 minutes. Hope asked, why does all of this say 10:05 a.m.? Because I forgot to update the times before I got up here. I'm sorry. I'll try to do better. It's been a long day. But I will have these updated before they're sent out on social media. But I promise you all of the information in there is updated. I just forgot to change the actual time at the top of the screen. The classic question of could the storm shift west? We're not expecting a westward shift. In fact, the National Hurricane Center has indicated that it's more likely to be shifted even further to the east with the late evening advisory, just judging by how the computer models have been trending. So it's more likely that we're going to see an eastward shift than a westward shift. As Andy points out correctly, if you missed the parish, I will post these slides after the briefing. They'll be available on Facebook. They'll be available on X. So they will be shared, hopefully widely, and on those social media pages for your perusal just as soon as we wrap up the briefing here. These videos are also available as recordings, so you can always go back and watch it from the beginning or just rewind until you get to your parish if you want to see it that way. Gwen asks, can residents in Lafayette stay in their mobile homes? At this point, there's nothing that would lead me to indicate otherwise, unless your mobile home can't withstand a 50-mile-an-hour wind gust. Ideally, it would be better if they had their tie downs. If you feel uncomfortable or you don't feel like your mobile home could withstand a 50-mile-an-hour wind gust, then it might be a good idea to go find another shelter, at least for during the day tomorrow. I think most of the strongest winds are going to be out of here by tomorrow night. So if you just have a friend you can go hang out with for the day, place of business, Walmart, any kind of store, for just even a few hours to get out of there just in case, you'd probably be safer that way if you are not sure if your mobile home would be able to withstand that. A lot of people asking about areas across Southeast Louisiana. We do not explicitly cover Southeast Louisiana. I would love to create slides and graphics for every parish in Louisiana, but we don't explicitly cover that area. There is a forecast office, the Weather Forecast Office in Slidell, that covers Southeast Louisiana, and they can provide much more details than we can. I am legally not able to offer too much more than just a broad overview of what's going on, because they're the ones that focus on those specific areas. So they have those details, just like we have the details for Southwest Louisiana. Johnny says, Category 1, nice. Just watch out for the floods, tree roots soften, and they fall. And that's why we're worried about power outages, because oftentimes you will get saturated soils, and any kind of weak trees or branches will fall onto those power lines, and that's where those power outages occur. So yeah, I do think there is going to be some with that, just for those weak trees. Although previous hurricanes in recent years have taken down a lot of the weak trees, but there are still some out there. All right, surprisingly, not seeing too many questions on here. That's certainly some good news. So I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up for the time being so I can run over to my other briefing here. I'm sorry for cutting this one a little bit shorter than usual, but I think we all have a pretty good idea, actually, of what's going on here. Again, the parish by parish breakdown is going to be posted on our social media pages, so they will be there for your perusal within the next, we'll say, 20 minutes or so, as soon as I can get them out, and that will be good, great, and wonderful. Our next briefing will be 10:30 p.m. this evening. We'll have another update from the National Hurricane Center at 10 p.m., and then we'll provide an update here thereafter at 10:30. In the meantime, if you do have a question that I didn't get to, or that you think of while we're not here hanging out, you can always send me a direct message on Facebook. I've been answering questions there all day long. You can also email me. Email's on the screen there, donald.jones@noaa.gov. Give us a call, area code 337-477-5285, and we'll be happy to get you an answer to all of those burning questions. In the meantime, everyone have a wonderful rest of your afternoon and evening. Stay safe, stay dry, stay calm, stay cool, stay collected, stay wonderful. And we'll talk to you again 10:30 p.m. this evening.